to the ABC Podcast.
Always be cool.
The show where your hosts, DC and BK, showcase your local business and real estate pros going gangbusters in leadership, community involvement, and just being cool.
Here are your hosts, serial entrepreneurs, mortgage experts at Summit Lending, and partners in crime, Darren Copeland and Bobby Kerr.
All right, everybody, it's the Always Be Cool podcast, hanging out with your hosts, Bobby Kerr, Darren Copeland.
What's up, everybody?
We're with someone that's really, really special today, someone that's like a lot of our guests in the Royals family, so to speak. DC's going to give a formal introduction, but we have Mr. Dave Holtzman in the house.
All right, here we go, everyone. Associate producer of baseball information and site producer for the Kansas City Royals. Volunteer instructor at the KC Urban Youth Academy since 2020. Before that, he was also director of communications for the San Diego Padres. He's experienced communicator, storyteller, and producer. Graduated from the University of Kansas with a bachelor degree in sports management, and later on got his master's in sports administration. First came to the Royals in 2004 as an intern. He is the lead in providing data and stats for the members of the Kansas City Royals broadcasting team. He is passionate about the next generation. All-around awesome guy, Dave Holtzman. Welcome to the show, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
Oh, there's going to be some good stuff. So, Bobby, where should we start, man?
Well, I think, was it Joel that set us up together?
He did.
Yeah,
Joel
Goldberg.
Mr. Goldberg. So that was pretty
Mr.
cool.
Goldberg. I don't think I've ever called him that before.
I don't know if he deserves that. But no, yeah, it's a good buddy of ours, too, and he was on the show a couple of weeks ago.
I listened to it.
And did you now?
I did.
Yeah.
cool.
Any takeaways?
It was pure Joel.
Joel.
Right.
And that makes it enjoyable.
Yeah, it was. I think we were able to get in one or two questions, and he pretty much ran with the rest of it.
He's well versed in talking.
Yes.
But being interesting.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's almost like he should do it for a living.
Right?
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, this is really a pleasure to have you. Someone that's, even though you're not formally a Kansas City Royals team member, which I think that's an important distinction because most people think that you or Joel or all these guys that we see every day or hear, they're part of the Royals team or company, but actually you're a team member of Bally Sports, correct?
Correct. Technically, we are a Bally Sports employee, and they're based in San Diego, at least our region is. But we are more Royals adjacent, I like to say. We're definitely, with the team a lot, especially during the season. We're lucky enough, Joel and the broadcasters and I are lucky enough to travel with the team. So we're on the team plane. We're in the team hotel.
Nice.
So we do feel a huge part of the team. And to the point of back when the postseason was happening, the team, the Glass family at the time, were kind enough to give us World Series rings. So
wow.
To
That's
be a part of the team
fantastic.
to that level is it's pretty special.
And you have the World Series ring with you.
I didn't bring it. I didn't bring it. It can't. Yeah.
You know what?
It doesn't leave.
Speaking of like fingers and things,
you're not going to go
I'm just
there,
going to jump right into it.
Okay, all right.
Do you know who Jamie Bluma is?
I do know.
Yeah,
Jamie
good
Bluma.
personal friend of ours. And Jamie came to the show.
He had an unfortunate accident.
He had an unfortunate accident. Are you familiar with this story?
No.
He was changing some lights at a batting cage. I think that he was part owner of. And so above the nets, right above the netting, you've got all the fluorescent lights. DC's just shaking his head. Well, anyway, he was changing some lights and he was on a ladder. Long story short, ladder falls out from underneath his legs. His hand gets caught in the netting on his way down. He falls. Finger stays in the netting. Anyway, he was kind enough to have it encased in like a polymer.
Like a snow globe.
Like
It looked like a snow globe. Yeah.
Like a snow globe.
And he brought it to the show.
And debuted it. He debuted it on the show.
Yes, he did. Because it was set next to his ice cream and frozen meat for about a decade, and then I think he had it done.
Yeah.
So
that's not an exaggeration.
Exactly.
That's I do not have a show and tell item of that.
So you almost brought a ring.
Right.
He brought almost a ring finger.
That's right.
So
Perfect.
Right. So how cool was that? I mean, I know we'll get into some stories about the postseason run that the Royals had, back then. But I mean, how was that, man, to actually have? And you saw some phenomenal games, obviously, like the rest of us did. But man, what was that like to actually get a legit MLB World Series ring?
Special. To me, it really meant a lot more. I'm not going to say more, as much or more than a lot of other people, because I was with the Royals
in the lean years.
In the lean years.
Yes.
So I was going to let you kind of fill in the adjective.
That's a good way to put it.
It's because I started there in 2004 in the media relations department and was there for 9 seasons. So not great 9 seasons, but toward the end of it that's when they drafted and developed the core of what would be the 14 and 15 team, made some trades. So to see them from when, their introductory press conferences, writing the press releases for when we drafted Eric Hosmer and Mike Moustakas, to the point where I'm witnessing them winning the World Series, that journey, that made it very special. So when I look at the ring, that's kind of what it represents to me and brings back all the memories.
That's fantastic. That's because, you were literally there for the players, the beginning of their careers with the Royals, right?
No question. I mean, first spring trainings were them to kind of come out and kind of be wide-eyed to the point where they were world champions.
Yeah, so that's fantastic.
So let's back up a little bit. I think it's important for people that are listening to the show that maybe aren't necessarily diehard Royals fans, but they're not really familiar with you and kind of how you fit into this picture and why you're hanging out with us today on the ABC show. So maybe give a little bit of background of what you do right now, and then we can kind of dive into how you got into this whole crazy world.
Perfect. Yeah. My job basically, I take it as somebody that looks at the information and helps the broadcast tell stories each night. What I like to do, obviously, with baseball, it's all about numbers. Ryan Lefevre does a wonderful job with the stories in terms of words, and background, what they've done in their past and that type of thing. For me, I look at the numbers and I turn them into narratives. That's kind of what the idea is. Numbers to narratives. And so every morning or the night before, even as the game is unfolding that night, I'm starting to think about what our storyline should be the next day. What should we focus on? Who's hot? Who's not? What are the trends? What do the Royals need to do to get back into a race? What are the young guys providing? All that. And then so I share information in the morning through research notes, and I know you guys printed off something. And with the broadcasters, with our game producer, with our pre and post game producer, and then throughout the day with text messages and all of that, we develop what we're going to really feature that night on the show, and then hopefully watch it play out and hopefully entertain the audience who's watching and help them.
I think, first of all, this is really, really cool. So to lead off, see what I did there? To lead off by saying I take numbers and turn them into a narrative. I think for the lay person who watches a Royals broadcast or any sport broadcast, right? I think most people just make the assumption that if I see Trent Green calling a football game, right? That Trent's just out there talking football, and he just knows so much about the game that he's able to name all these players and the stats.
Just going with the flow.
And the story's going with the flow, right? Yep. Most people just assume that's the case, but that is not the case. And we're going to dive in a little bit. But, we've got an 8-page document here that is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. And I'll put some on the show notes so people can see too, if that's okay.
That is okay.
And, but the numbers, the narratives is so spot on, because I'm reading this when you sent it to us a couple of weeks ago, and it reads like a book. Like there are storylines talking about players' stats and the records, and like you said, what do the Royals need to do to get back in the race? And so people like Ryan Lefevre and Joel and Monty and Hud and all these guys can tell the story that you've built with numbers.
That's right. And because baseball, obviously at its essence, are as many numbers as you want. I mean, we try to remain, kind of at an upper level of that we could dig deep, but I think we lose. We have to understand who our audience is.
Sure.
Obviously, there's maybe 5% of our audience that really is into sports analytics and can understand some terms that. But for the most part, the 95% are who our audience is. So we want to make sure they understand things, and we'll introduce some other numbers at times. But the idea is to make sure and to make the numbers pertinent. They have to make sense. If you just throw out numbers just to throw out numbers without any context, it doesn't help you at all.
Well, exactly. And I love how, in this I mean, this literally looks like enough numbers to launch a rocket ship. I mean, it's just amazing. But I was reading through these, and the yellow highlights, which some of the most important ones. That's right. That are on here. But for the people who are listening, I mean, literally, you guys, what Dave is doing is he is setting up, Joel and Ryan and Jeff Montgomery and all of our announcers with the Kansas City Royals, literally setting them up for all the stats. So as you're listening for 9 innings, all this information, highlights, baseball majors everything, right? Mm-hmm. What guys are doing against lefties and righties and their on base percentages and, what the streaks recent streaks they've been on. Because I did notice, one of the columns was like a hot item and the other one was a cold item. I mean, just cold, so many things. So take us into a little bit about the preparation. Like you said, you kind of start the night before, but what are we talking about in terms of pulling the data and how many hours are you literally putting in for each game?
It's quite a bit. And honestly, I say I start the night before, but that's probably not entirely honest in that I start for a season. I'll start preparing probably in February.
Okay.
Just in terms
of. So you have like your own personal spring training.
Personal spring training with my computer and 5 or 6 different websites where I know where to go for certain information. Nice. So I'll start pulling it, preparing so that I have all that information at hand. Mm-hmm. But then day to day during the season, and obviously there's 162 games in about 180 plus days. Mm-hmm. So it's every day.
Sure.
The off days are few and far between. I'll just start working and compiling and building on certain themes or getting rid of themes that just don't make sense anymore.
Sure.
I mean, if I have something in my notes that talks about how hot the Royals offense is in their last 10 games, they've averaged 6 runs a game, let's say, and then they get shut out that night. Right. Well, obviously we're not going to run with how hot their offense is anymore. It just doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. So you transition to another topic. But I would say on a given day, I spend about 3 hours working on those notes.
Wow.
Just to make sure that they're correct.
I thought the number was going to be higher just because, as a person who's not that fluent with everything that you have to do, I'm thinking, man, this has got to be like 12 hours of work. But because you've made yourself so efficient and knowing, like you just said, those websites where exactly to go, it's incredible. I can't wait to for people to see this document, to see how special it is, because it is. Like when you sent it, I was like, holy crap.
Yeah. It's very I was doing some traveling. I printed it off and I took it on the plane just to read it.
Just to fall asleep.
Not to fall asleep. Because we're massive baseball nerds over here. So no, we get it. Now do you get any advance warning either earlier in the day as far as what the lineup's going to be? Does that help at all, or you're just kind of an overall prep? No matter who's going to start the next day, you're kind of going by a certain thing.
There's no real advanced, lineup warning type of thing, but you have a feel. Sure. Obviously, if they're going to be, let's just say the Royals are facing a tough lefty that next night, that there's a decent chance that the right-handed bats will be in the lineup. So I might focus on that for the notes or things like that. But obviously every day in the notes, I have a page each on the starting pitcher for both teams. One for the Royals, one for whomever they're playing opponent-wise, and because that's going to be a huge segment of what we talk about and a big part of how the game works out.
Right.
Of course, there are those few games when the starting pitcher's out after they've given up they have only one out and they're out of the game, and then you can just throw that page away.
Yeah, so, throw that out.
But that's baseball.
Here's a question. Rain out. You've done all this prep and there's a rain out. Can you apply that? Just you put it in the file cabinet until the game's made up? Or is it you just got to start over and let research each time?
It depends on if the Royals are playing the same opponent the next day. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that could be carried over, and then starting pitcher wise, if they remain the same, it's usually a good night for me. Honestly, I'll just have to kind of change some of the leaders.
Okay,
because obviously if somebody's hitting eighth, hitting eighth in an average in the American League, one night. That could change, even if their number doesn't change. If they're still hitting 304 or 307,
they could
move up or down in the rankings. So those things I do need to update. But otherwise, rainouts.
So you don't look at the rainout and be like, "Damn it, I did all that work for nothing."
Right.
Well,
Or it just goes into the next day on the doubleheader or something.
that happens a lot with starting pitchers. They get scratched, moved. A team that we're going to play has a rainout right before. Speaking of rainouts, right before we play them, and then that starting pitcher we end up not seeing.
Mm-hmm. So then that's frustrating.
Right.
Well, it's baseball.
Relative,
That's just I'm used to it after almost 20 years of doing this.
So you've been doing this for a long time. So tell the listeners a little bit that, you started with the Royals in 2004 as an intern. So at what point were you younger, like in high school before you went to KU? But at what point were you like, man, I really want to get into this sporting thing and I would love to start providing stats and help produce, a pregame and the show and all that? At what point were you just like, oh yeah, I want to do this?
I mean, my parents will tell me that I grew up in San Diego. I was a Padres fan.
Oh,
wow. Tony Gwynn was my hero, still is my hero. And my parents would tell me that I was, from the moment I was 3 or 4 years old, that I could kind of recite the Padres starting lineup, that type of thing. Awesome. So I guess it was from a very early age in terms of that. Mm-hmm. But in terms of knowing what I wanted to do and build, work around stats and narratives and baseball in general, that was probably just in college where I thought, well, there's a job where I could do that.
Yeah.
Said, yeah,
I'm in.
Yeah, and then I was, lucky enough to get an internship with the Royals, and 19 seasons later, here I am.
So you had a good turn, with the Royals. What made you go back to San Diego for a year for that quick 1 year stop, and then come back to Kansas City?
Yeah, I mean, it was an opportunity, to be honest, of a lifetime. And it was a nice job promotion. Mm-hmm. It was what I thought would be a dream job, to go home, work for my boyhood team.
Right.
And then a lot changed when I got there, good and bad, mostly not so great.
Right.
And my wife and our family wanted to get back here. So that's kind of why the year happened, and we badly wanted to get back to Kansas City. And at that point, kind of lucky enough to use some connections and use my skills to create this position with what was Fox Sports Kansas City at the time.
Right.
So before the 2014 season. So my timing worked out pretty well for getting back.
That's fantastic. Which is a perfect segue, talking about 2014. So before we started getting on air here, so we were talking about some stories. So is now a good time to start jumping in? Because I know our fellow listeners and buddies and fellow fantasy baseball players would love to hear some of this stuff.
I've got 3 ones that stick out, and hopefully I can tell them fairly quickly to not bore everybody out there. But the first one is...
We got 4 hours.
Yeah, you're good.
4 hours. So the first one is the day of the wild card game in 2014. I knew, or we all knew, that if they would win, we were going to immediately jump on a plane and go out to Anaheim to start that series, the American League Division Series.
Right.
So when I packed a bag. And I put it in the back of my car because we'd driven to the airport after the game. And as the game is unfolding and the Royals are losing by 3, 4, 5 runs, I'm just thinking about my bag. I'm thinking about my luggage in the backseat of my car, and I'm thinking about how sad I'm going to be when I see it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then boom, the 8th inning happens, the 9th inning happens. They tie it up, and there we go. It was a happy bag.
Right. Turned into the happy bag.
It was a very happy bag, and we got to, it was really a dream situation of, we closed our eyes and all of a sudden we were on a plane to Anaheim, woke up in Anaheim the next day and had a workout, and 8 innings later they're in the World Series and that type of thing. So
that is fantastic. So talk about, how was the drive and what was the atmosphere on the plane ride from Kansas City out to Anaheim after that?
I think everybody was obviously ecstatic, but they were also incredibly tired. I mean, the game went past midnight. I mean, and so it was it was just giddiness and combination and everything. And I was, a bit of me was concerned, like, how are they going to
rally?
Rally back and do that. But that off day was huge, and everybody just momentum. But it was a great plane ride. I'm guessing, even though it was 3, 4 in the morning, not many people were sleeping. They were just fired up.
Right.
Like the rest of the city.
Like the whole city, right.
I remember, so I was teaching middle school at the time in Lexington, Missouri. So, about a 45 or hour drive back to Lexington. And we drove, we had a great time at the game. And we were driving back. I had to teach the next morning. And just going into school, no sleep, looking very, very tired and ragged and trying to motivate and educate these young kids. And I'm thinking, that was the best night of my life, kids. You're just going to have to give me some grace today.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll understand. Hopefully they understand now.
Yeah, they do.
Here's a video for you. Watch it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, what's another one you
All right,
got
so
besides the happy bag?
Let's fast forward to 2015. I'm leaving out so many great stories, and I can think about them all the time, and I'll probably kick myself for not telling one. But 2015, we're in Houston, Game 4. The Royals looks like it's over. What my job was is I was a site producer. I was a field producer for Fox Sports Kansas City at the time. So I was helping produce the post-game show. That's what we did post-game. So we'd be on the field grabbing guests. I'd be in the, helping Joel in the clubhouse grabbing guests, that type of thing after a clinch situation. So Game 4, Jeff Montgomery and I were sitting in the back of the radio booth. We didn't really have seats or anything. So we're just sitting in the back of the radio booth, and the 8th inning starts happening. It starts building and building. And I keep looking at Monty, and we're not saying anything. We're just, what's going on? And then, just as they kept getting hits, and then, the Kendrys Morales ball up the middle, which, by the way, it was called an error, but it was, if you go back and look, and we talk about this on the air still, the exit velocity of that ball, I think, was about 107 miles an hour.
Wow.
So it wasn't as easy a play as Carlos Correa looked like it should have been.
That's true.
Sure, because he crushed it.
That ball was moving.
Yeah.
So, but once that ball got through, all of a sudden, Monty and I were just jumping up and down in the back of the radio booth, trying not to distract Ryan, who's on the call on the radio. Trying not to yell too loudly. And then an inning later, we were on the field, and I remember walking out onto the field through the crowd, and the crowd looked like they had seen a ghost. They were absolutely stunned, and they knew it was over, and I think the Royals knew it was over. So, yeah, and the other story, the last one I'll tell, and then we can move on, but is Game 5 of the World Series in 15 in New York. I had kind of an eventful day that morning. I like going out running all the cities we go to, and that morning I was running Central Park, and I took a spill. Like, I fell.
Did you really?
Can you imagine how embarrassing it is to fall anyway, but to fall in front of New Yorkers?
People,
right.
Yeah.
But the big question is, did you have your Royals gear on when you fell?
No, we don't. Okay. I don't run in Royals gear just for that reason. So I fell, and of course you jump right back up when it's in front of a lot of people, and I finished my run as kind of had some blood going down my leg, but I'm like, this is going to be an interesting day. And we go to the game. The game happens, Hosmer's dash, everything like that. We're getting ready to go on the field as if the Royals were going to lose in the top of the 9th inning. And then we immediately left and went back to the concourse and watched the game. But then later on, when the Royals had scored 5 and were ready to clinch it, we were back in kind of the tunnel area where I couldn't really see the game. So I was just kind of judging by what the crowd was happening, how many outs there were, and that type of thing. And then when the third out happened, I didn't have a view of their celebration, but all I could see was kind of this little bit of the sky looking out to the field, and I saw 5, 6 gloves. All I saw were gloves flying in the air, and I'm like, that's special.
That's pretty cool.
I have my angle of them winning the World Series was gloves in the air.
Which is, if you think about it, it's a one-of-a-kind view.
Yeah.
Right?
Other than not being able to watch the actual play, but yeah.
Like that angle, that view is something that nobody else got to see. Like, what a cool memory.
It was fun. And then a couple hours later, we were back at the team hotel, and I was holding the trophy. So had a picture with that and that type of deal.
That's all. Thank you for sharing
amazing.
those stories.
Sure.
That's amazing. So do you ever journal some of these stories as the years go on? Do you ever write down these stories as time goes on so you can go back and reflect on them, kind of why they're so fresh in your mind?
I don't. I should. Right now they're still fresh and my memory is still there, I guess.
That's good.
Yeah, I need to write them down because who knows in 10, 15, 20 years if I will remember them as fresh as I do now, even 7 years later.
Yeah. That's amazing. I can't believe it's been 7 years already.
Yeah.
I know. I'm ready for some more winning.
I know, right?
It's coming.
Exactly.
It's coming.
I think so.
Let's talk about that. That's a good lead in, right?
Sure.
So tell us a few things what you're excited about. The hardcore Royals fans, they're familiar with some of the young kids, but what are you in particular excited about as we have this youth movement going on right now?
You say it's coming, so what's the
You're going to call me on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, first off, I mean, I've seen it once before. We all did, but I saw it directly in terms of, like I talked about when I was with Royals in PR, and I saw the debuts of Hosmer and Moustakas and that type of deal, and this feels similar in terms of the position players. Obviously, the pitching last year was behind, and I think that, I don't know for sure, but I think that their processes are changing enough that there's going to be quite a development process with that. An increase, and honestly, a lot happens just by just by living it and experiencing success and building on that and learning what you do well and what you don't do well. But I will let JJ and his group kind of speak for the general idea of it, or the specifics. But for me, just the general feel, if I get the same feeling, and it's all about trusting who is in charge of developing those players and trusting the character of the players. And watching it last year, I was lucky enough to be back on the road with the team in COVID in 2020 and 2021. We weren't able to travel. But last year I was in the clubhouse postgame a lot, and I did see and experience, again, the character of the people like Bobby Witt Jr. and Vinny Pasquantino and Nate Eaton. I mean, those guys are guys that really remind me of those guys in a decade ago.
Yeah, a lot of credit to Dayton for really developing and finding the quality humans who also happen to be phenomenal ball players, and then JJ carrying that torch in his way.
I just get the feeling again, and it was the same thing back then, that these guys first and foremost want to win, and then they realize that once they do win, then the individual accolades and the financial aspect of it will follow. Sure. But first, they're here to win, and they're going to do whatever it takes to get to that point.
And judging by the offseason and the winter meetings and us not really going in, diving in, signing, a bunch of free agents or any free agents for that matter, it really seems like they're okay with the core of young players that they have, that they're going to develop them, and just like, all right, it's your time to go out there, get more experience, and get out there and get after it.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that they think that, I mean, they've put a lot of work into developing those players to this level, and it would be at this point, I would guess, silly to just let the change course because of that. And now that they have a new manager with Cortero, and let him get his sink his teeth into this talented group and see what comes out of it.
Right.
Well, you said you're going to let JJ speak for himself, so marking down that Dave is lining up JJ Piccolo as a guest on the ABC podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We really appreciate
you. I'll talk to JJ for you.
That'd be fantastic.
I love it. So obviously you're not. We talked about you not being like an employee of the Royals, but what did you describe it like? How did you describe it? Like
a part adjacent.
Adjacent, yeah. Thank you. So other counterparts to like do what you do with other either organizations or other broadcast networks. Like I'm assuming there's someone in your role for like the Yes Network or something like that. Do you guys like have a producer club that you guys all talk to each other and kind of get tips and tricks, or do you keep in touch with anybody else?
Not a ton. I mean, we see them, for 3-day segments.
Sure.
Obviously when the teams are playing each other and you kind of share some things, but it's a lot of just kind of observing. I mean, if you see something that's really something that they do that's really cool, you go, well, what did you do? Or, can we take that and use that for the benefit of our broadcast? Is it usually
pretty like reciprocal in that way? Like if you see something that you like, you're like, that would be great on a Royals broadcast, and you talk to them, and do people share best practices?
Yeah, no question.
That's good.
People do share.
That's cool.
And a lot of the times for me, I'm not in charge of the game production. Like I said, I'm in charge of kind of the storyboard, building the outline for what we're going to talk about. And for me, one of the goals is to make sure that our broadcasters and producers know exactly, that they can rely on my information to be correct, to be topical. And for the broadcaster's sake, for them to take my information directly to the coaching staff that afternoon before the game and say, hey, I've noticed in our notes that this is happening. Tell me why. And that way on the broadcast later on, they can share that story. Hey, I was talking to pitching coach blah, blah, blah about this number.
Very
we can show the number on the screen.
Yep.
And here's why this is happening, and here's what they're doing to correct it, or here's what they're doing to continue it. So you get their feedback, and almost all the time, they know that number. There's some times where they go, "Oh, I didn't even know that was happening." And that's where it's really cool. I feel like I'm sharing things with them. But that's the broadcaster tasked with taking that information and getting real life information back from the coaches.
Well, and it seems like, the Royals have done a really good job, that we have an amazing, collection of broadcasters, both on TV and radio. So, we were talking about stories. Is there anything, that was kind of like a last minute curveball that maybe maybe you guys weren't foreseeing coming up, or do you guys just do so much prep that there's really no curveballs that can?
There's definitely curveballs that happen.
Right. Is there anything that you can share with us in a cool way?
I was trying to think back. I mean, honestly, almost every day there's something that changes that we're not anticipating. I mean, that's what baseball is all about. I mean, sports in general. That's why people love it. And HUD says it all the time. And so you're always going to see something that happened that's never happened before. And my goal with all of that is to make sure with the computer and the information that I have in front of me and where to go is to, when HUD says that, my brain immediately clicks on like, I wonder if this, or I wonder when the last time that, and I wonder what happened after that. And then I'll quickly, hopefully do research. And then within the span of sometimes 10 seconds, I can pass HUD a note, whether it's on a whiteboard that I write on or whatever. And he immediately can say, "Hey, Holtzy just told me the blah, blah, blah." And he kind of puts a bow on the end of the story.
Awesome.
So is that
awesome.
For the people that are listening, and for us, for that matter, is it during the game when curveballs are thrown or that you're making changes? It literally is you going straight to Ryan and HUD or whomever is on the broadcast. Like it's a whiteboard or a note or an electronic message if you're not directly with them.
It's just, for the most part, it's just Ryan, HUD, and me in the booth. So, yeah, I'm in charge of, as the game unfolds and things happen, I'm in charge of helping them be informed and, again, tell stories, but to be informed about what happened and put it in a context. And I've known Ryan so long. I mean, since I've been with the Royals, so I've known Ryan almost 2 decades, where there's a lot of time when he would say something and he'll look at me and I'll just nod. And he'll know exactly, he's wondering a specific question about is it 6, is it 7, and I'll just nod and he'll go right off.
Just that nonverbal communication.
We don't. There's a lot of times we don't have to. I don't even have to tell him anything. He'll know exactly what I'm telling him without saying anything or writing anything down.
That's fantastic.
That is cool.
Because you have that connection, right?
It's
just like a pitcher and catcher working together for so many years. They just know.
No, and I know what he likes, and I know what he likes to focus on, and like I said earlier, he's great at doing the research about certain guys' families or their background or whatever, and then I add the layer of the stats and what's actually happening on the field at the time.
That's really cool. Yeah. I mean, I think that can be transferable to anything. Like I also am a musician, so there have been times over the course of my playing days that, after being in a band with someone for 10 plus years, you can play on a stage, look at each other and make adjustments on the fly, and nobody has to talk. Nobody says anything. You just, you're communicating through a different channel. It's pretty bizarre, but
that speaks my language because I'm a big Fish fan. So
there you go.
I've been Fish fan for almost 30 years. So that's exactly what they do is they look at each other and they know exactly where everybody's going. And then they fall. If somebody goes off in a different place, they just jump right in. So
I had this crazy experience about 10 years ago after my first Royals fantasy camp, and it wasn't quite as popular as what it is today because now, for anyone that knows, Royals fantasy camp for 100 guys sells out in about anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. It's crazy. So about 10 years ago, they had to do different promotions or anything, and I volunteered Dean. I'm like, hey, if you ever want me to go on air, I would love to go chat about – I've got a video of it somewhere. So in the third inning, I was able to do – the top of the third, I was able to do TV. It was Physioc and Hudler. And then on the bottom of the third, I got to get on radio, and it was Denny Matthews and Lefevre at the time was on the radio. But it gave me an appreciation of, number one, being super nervous and being on camera on a live broadcast, right? But you're talking, you're answering questions, but then you have someone, was it maybe Don Free?
For radio-wise.
Yeah, for talking in your ear at the same time. And just the talent it takes those guys to get used to it, because I think a lot of people think, oh, well, here's a former major league player, and of course they can just naturally go into broadcasting. But I don't think that's the case at all. Like, you have to have some talent because there's a lot of stuff going on in the background during the broadcast.
I mean, I would task somebody to sit at their house and try and watch a game and try to talk about it for 3 straight hours.
Right.
And then record it and listen back and see how they sound.
Right.
I mean, it takes an immense amount of talent. And I should emphasize that while, I provide them with an outline and stats and numbers and narratives, as I've said, for them to ingest it and then for them to speak it in proper English or HUD English, whichever one you want to
Right.
to do, but make sure it's clear to everybody out there, all of the hundreds of thousands of viewers that we have every night. It's an incredible ability. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Well, again, for another music reference, you're almost like the composer and they're like the artists performing the composition. And both are equally as important for the piece of music.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. That's really special.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we have nothing but love for Jeff Montgomery, but do you see him very often?
In the off season, not too often.
Okay.
But certainly every day during the season.
Well, he's a very, very tough scorekeeper when it comes to being your coach at Royals Fantasy Camp, just to let you know.
Well, maybe you guys need some stats down there and maybe come down and.
Oh my God!
Yes.
We don't need a real stats guy because our stats are.
We need someone who's very forgiving.
They're kind of liberal in the sense that Kendrys Morales hit would have absolutely been a hit, not an error at fantasy camp, but it would have been hit at about 75 miles per hour as opposed to 107.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
So someone who maybe grows up and they look at ball cards and they memorize the back, like you said, we all did the same thing. But I certainly, at one point, my brain started to flex and say, okay, you're more of an artist, right? As opposed to, like, you think of like Dave Ramsey saying nerds versus free spirits, right? So you've got quote unquote nerds who numbers driven, really get into the statistical things. How is it that someone's path goes from memorizing a baseball card to I want to be involved with, I love sports too, and so they get to be in your position? Like your parents said you were doing that at 3 years old. Is it pretty commonplace that people in your type of position are just so drawn to telling a narrative through numbers?
I would think it's semi-common, especially with my communications PR background. I mean, I'm used to working with media, and connecting the players to the media and giving the media information, for the team to be seen in the best light possible.
Right.
So, I mean, with that background, and I used to be in journalism in high school. I was the editor-in-chief of my high school newspaper. So I was a good writer. I understood storytelling in that way. So
I think that's important for your success is that it's not just numbers, it's words.
It's not just numbers. I didn't know where you were going to go with all the stat and the nerd, and I thought, I was getting ready to throw the microphone and leave the room.
I'm out.
Just calling me a nerd because I thought if you guys asked me here, I was cool.
You obviously are
one of the coolest so far.
Yeah, well, but it's a balance.
Yeah,
and I take pride in being able to process the numbers, but also tell that story in the right context and what matters and what doesn't. I mean, I could give Ryan, I could give HUD a ton of different numbers during the night, but some of them they might throw it out there and it doesn't mean anything in terms of what's going on in the game. I take a lot of pride in making sure that whatever numbers we tell make a lot of sense. And a lot of the times it's a prediction. I mean, blah, blah, blah is about to do this, and he's a really good hitter against change-ups, against left-handers, and what happens pitch or two later, the guy hits a home run.
Right.
And that happens a lot.
That's pretty cool. And also, Dave, you do an amazing job, with the production and numbers, but you truly have to be a fan at heart at the same time of baseball, because obviously if you didn't enjoy baseball, you wouldn't be able to put in the work and the passion that you do behind it. So, kudos to you, because, this seems like an absolute dream job, right? To be able to be on the road and watch the Royals for 162 games. But I'm guessing, 6 or 7 months, I mean, that's a pretty
grind.
long haul. That's a grind, right?
It's a long haul. I've never actually sat down. My wife and I joke about this, but I've never actually sat down and figured out like how many exact hours I do work. But I have a pretty good feeling that my hours during that 6+ month season equate to very similar to somebody else for a 12-month year.
Oh,
absolutely.
So, I mean, I definitely cherish the off season. Although I get antsy, certainly this time of year.
Sure.
After I'm refreshed, I'm ready to go again.
Right,
So
after the winter meetings. Now, does your wife, does she ever come on road trips to hang out with you a
every
little bit?
so often she'll join me. We have a couple children, 15 and 12. So she's obviously busy
Sure,
back
absolutely.
home. And when I'm on the road, I mean, responsibilities are on her nonstop.
Exactly.
So.
Yep, she's got a big job. So
Huge
speaking of travel, what's your favorite city to travel to? Do you have a special city and like a special restaurant that you like to go check out?
You're speaking my language now. I mean, I love to. I've talked about kind of running in different cities, so that's one of the criteria I have for a great city. Is it a good running city? Can I run by the water, whether it's in Seattle or down in Boston, by the river and that type of thing. So good running city. Is there good food we can find that we can walk to? And then how is the ballpark? So, I mean, in terms of looking at all of that, Seattle is one of my favorites.
Okay.
The ballpark is great. The city is great. I love the seafood, the market. For me, I take advantage of trying to get foods and get experiences that we can't have in Kansas City.
Exactly.
Now, vice versa, a lot of teams, for some reason, in the press club, love to serve, when the Royals are in town, they love to serve barbecue. And
why would you do that?
we laugh and just like, what? I mean, we
It's
don't
not
have
gonna
crab
be
cakes
matched,
when Baltimore
right?
comes.
Let's
right?
do something local. Right?
Yeah, I mean, why would you do that when it's the best here in the world? So, I mean, Boston is great. I mentioned Boston. New York is good for a short amount of time.
Right.
It's perfect that
Short doses.
It's perfect that we have a 2 or 3 or 4, usually a 3 or 4 game series there. I mean, those are some of the best ones. I'm excited, with the new schedule.
That's right.
We play every team now at least one series, so we'll be going to every National League city every other year. So it'd be good to kind of some of the cities I'm not too familiar with. I've been to every ballpark in baseball, but it's always nice to kind of refamiliarize yourself with a Philadelphia or something like that.
And I think it's great for the fans too. I mean, I was looking at the Royals schedule the other day, and Bobby and I and a bunch of guys, we like to do different road trips and stuff. But I mean, for the Royals fans to have a chance to go to Wrigley, right, and go check out Chicago or, Philadelphia. And I know we're going back up to Milwaukee and even the Arizona Cardinals. But I think it's really cool for the fans, too, to have that opportunity to go on a road trip and see the Royals in parks that they normally haven't been going to on a regular basis.
I would highly recommend it. I mean, and to be honest, the Royals have a great following and vocal in a lot of the cities that you wouldn't think. And a lot of the crew that we pick up on the road, whatever city we're in, they always make note. Well, there's a lot of Royals fans here.
That's
and it's
cool.
just it's a pride thing, and people in Kansas City understand that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would highly recommend taking a weekend trip somewhere that you haven't been. Check out the Royals for a game or two, but then do other things in that city. It's a great trip.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I've got a kind of an odd question for you. So there are certain members of Bally Sports or the Royals that are not on camera or on radio, right? But we still know you. So there's Don Free, or Dave Holtzman, or, there are several key members of the team that get referenced.
Right.
Is that kind of an odd thing that most people in Kansas City, at least that watch the Royals broadcast, they know who you are, but they probably couldn't pick you out of a lineup?
It's a little odd.
Is that odd?
I wouldn't. They have to really be dedicated fans to know who I am, though. I mean, some people do. Oh, you're Holtzy, because Ryan and Hud just call me Holtzy on the air,
right,
instead of Dave Holtzman, the full name. But yeah, I mean, it's a little odd, but we all. It's great that they do that because they understand there are so many people in our crew that do a ton of work. They're there 4, 5, 6 hours before we come on the air doing the work to make sure that the broadcast goes well, and they deserve to have their name name mentioned and recognized. So you'll hear, Kevin Cedergren's our game producer, and Steve Kurtenbach's our director. Yep. You'll hear Sammy. Everyone says Sammy. Sammy's our replay guy, our tape guy. He's doing a ton of NFL right now. He works as much as he wants because he's fantastic at what he does one of the best. Al Broughton is our graphics guy, and they've all been doing it for a long time, and they're all they all want the team to do well too, and that's what's fun about it is some crews around baseball, they clock in, they do a game, they clock out, they move on. Our crew really wants the team to win.
That's cool.
So, that's awesome. Well, hopefully we'll start seeing a bunch of winning, coming up in the near future for sure.
For sure.
Do you ever get stopped on the street or in a restaurant and say, "Hey, Holtzy"?
No, I mean I'm not on the air enough in terms of a camera shot.
Sure.
For to recognize me. So I mean it's probably happened once or twice in my 9 years doing it. So.
Right.
Well, next time we see you at a restaurant,
exactly.
We'll
holler.
We're hanging out in Olathe.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's awesome.
All right, so here, this is an odd question, and I'm not trying to be funny, but we all know Hudler likes to have his baseball in the booth, right? So, is there someone that's responsible for making sure that he has a baseball, or is that just all him? That he brings the baseball to make sure he has that thing at all times.
It's an all hands on deck thing.
Is it?
Because his ball will disappear at times, sometimes he gives it to people.
Yep.
A lot of times, it hasn't happened lately, but a lot of times we'll get a shot of somebody that didn't get a foul ball and their brother got it or whatever. And Hud finds a way to get his ball down to the kid to make sure the kid is happy.
That's cool.
But also he needs the ball in his hand because that is
his comfort.
It's his whoopee.
It's his binky.
Yeah, it is. So he has, Jeff Davenport, who's the Royals senior director, vice president, traveling secretary, will make sure he has, he'll need a ball so he can think, so he can talk.
Great. Yeah,
that's cool.
I actually just talked to him this morning through email, so we're lining up a date for January for Hud to be on the show.
That'll be a must listen.
It will
must listen because we got to get him here soon. Because what's the date for spring training?
Well, it's a little bit earlier this year, but he probably won't go down until I would say late February.
Okay.
But they start earlier than that just because of the World Baseball Classic this year.
Right.
Kind of.
Yeah, we've had obviously we've had Ryan on the show, Joel on the show. So with Hud, we got to get Monty in here.
Yes.
Actually, I need to text Monty
yes, because he promised he would come in and hang out with us.
We
gotta get
Monty.
Monty goes down he has a house in Florida in the off season. Monty's not a big cold guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't blame him. Growing up in San Diego, my blood is thin as well.
Right.
So Monty loves to kind of spend the winter down in Florida.
In the warm. So.
Here, I got a quick question. So one of our buddies asked us to ask you this. So with the talk of a new stadium, right? And there's just such an undertaking with moving an entire team to a different stadium, right? When it comes to the broadcast, is that something that when there's change and you've got different facilities and different dynamics in terms of sound and video, is that something that even as early as now when it's coming, like, is that something you guys talk about as like, ooh, when this happens, this is going to be an interesting change?
It will be interesting. I'm not sure if we've started that conversation yet, but obviously the new ballpark presents a lot of opportunities for the broadcast, and there will be a lot of challenges. But there, you would be amazed at how many different camera angles that we could talk about. This would be cool if we had a camera spot here. This would be cool if we could put a microphone here. Discussing where the center field camera is, because obviously, as people know that watch the Royals a lot, center field camera when it's windy gets hit with a rainstorm.
It's all wet. Yeah.
With the fountain. I mean, so those are a lot of logistical things, and that'll be conversations that Bally Sports has with the Royals broadcasting group as the planning process happens. But I'm honestly not sure if that's started yet or what. I'm guessing not, but
certainly something that will be crossing all of your minds. Yeah,
no question.
That's a great question from Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. Now, do you guys go down to spring training as well to prep a little bit for the upcoming season, or do you guys pretty much locked and loaded and good to go?
I'm usually here, honestly, because they just don't, in terms of spring training numbers and and storylines. It's more just kind of a generic meeting the new players and Joel interviewing people and discussing the game. So I'm here researching at home. But yeah, the rest of the broadcasters will head down and do however many games we will do down there for the spring. But
that's cool.
I will be here.
That's cool.
Getting ready.
So I thought about an earlier question, Bobby. So you were talking about, Dave, earlier that, back in your day, you were responsible for bringing some of the players over, for post-game interviews, right? Was there a particular moment that you remember or a story where maybe it was a challenge to get someone to come over and chat? Or is everyone just like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll do an interview?
Almost everybody is happy to do an interview because in that we only do interviews when it's a winning situation, obviously.
Right.
There are some guys that they have something else on their mind and they know that they probably wouldn't be in the right mindset to do an interview with Joel at that moment. So they almost always, if it happens, they respectfully decline or they later on apologize and give a reason or that type of thing. But it is, 99% success rate in terms of who we want. And we'll go through what I used to do now with the Royals PR staff. Same thing. Well, in the top of the ninth, hey, Joel will text them or our producer will text them and say, we're looking for this guy. And here's a backup in case that doesn't work.
Nice.
And
very cool.
Yeah.
So you guys have a plan at all times.
Always a plan.
Always.
Now
a plan.
You don't want to send that text too early. Because you don't want to be jinxed, the jinx, and then you don't want to be blamed in case somebody,
right. If they blow a lead
Thanks for requesting that early, and we just immediately blew the lead. And now we've lost. So, and that does happen.
Oh yes, exactly.
Wow.
So,
any other stories you want to share before we wrap up the show today?
I mean, it's for me. There's just so many stories going through my head right now it's hard to. I do remember. The first time this was in, I guess, 2011, the first time that all of those young players, the Hosmers, the Moustakas, the Perezes, were in spring training. And I remember just the feeling I had. And that was my first time going to spring training was 2007. So that would have been my fifth spring training.
Okay.
And I'll never forget the feeling I had when they were in the clubhouse or when they were out on the field of this, and I guarantee you that so many other people inside the organization felt this as well. It's like, this is the start of what is going to be something special. And they could, and I bet that's what Dayton and Ned and JJ and Scott Sharp and everybody were thinking about as well when they did clinch the World Series in Game 5 in New York, is they immediately thought about those feelings.
Wow.
And that's what I thought about. And that's why I work in sports, is to watch the progression and this, I hate to go back to it, but the storytelling, the narrative of here's where they came from, here's the struggles they went through, and here's the payoff. And it's not really a story other than just a thought that I had.
Right.
So
it's special.
That's a great way to wrap things up, man, because it's got to be so exciting to see those young kids and have the challenges. And, even some of our favorite guys had to get sent down for a little bit, right?
Of course.
Yep.
And then they come back up and they figure it out. And, baseball's literally just one of the hardest sports, to make it and
No
stay
question.
there, right?
It's the hardest, in my opinion. It's all about failure and dealing with it and how you wake up the next day and convince yourself this day is going to be better.
Right.
And I'm going to help the team win.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
That's fantastic, man.
Holtzy, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Great job.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes.
Well, Dave Holtzman, everybody, future author of Numbers to Narratives, owner of the Happy Bag from 2014. Right. This has been the Always Be Cool podcast at the Summit Lending Studios, hanging out with Dave Holtzman, Bobby Kerr, Darren Copeland. You guys make sure to check us out online at Instagram and Facebook at ABC Pod. Also, check us out on wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Google, and Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review. You guys have a great day.
Thanks
so
everyone.
much. Thank you.
If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode. And for that, Darren and Bobby thank you from the bottom of their hearts.
They hope you enjoyed this new episode. And if you did, please leave them a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're listening. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in our community.
Also, feel free to let DC and BK know which business or community leaders you'd like to see covered in future episodes. Get in touch in the comments or on social media. See you next time for a new episode. And remember, always be cool.
This podcast is powered by Summit Lending, NMLS number 1850081, Equal Housing Lender.